Hi, and welcome to ITAD in 15. My name's Steve Millings, I'm founder of Adisa. I'm joined today by Paul Katzoff, who's the CEO of Blackbelt 360. So welcome, Paul.
Hi, Steve. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And of course, as usual on these calls, we've known each other a long time, 10 plus years. For those of you, or those of the watchers who don't know your journey in the data sanitization space, just talk through, let's go backwards a little bit. Let's talk through your
Sure.
foundings, because you're a veteran in the sector now.
I am. Started out at Weclome software back in 2008. And back then we were in a little basement unit there in Orem, Utah. And we focused on just erasing computers for the direct-to-consumer market. So we're in a lot of retailers, things like that. And moved up in that organization up into the sales side and eventually became CEO back in, I want to say 2018, around then. So I was running WipeDrive White Can software, and we got acquired by Blanco in 2022. So good 16 years in the industry.
And of course, now we're at Black Belt 360. We know Black Belt very well. We've tested the product in several times over the years. On your return to the sector, data sanitization, what's changed in the last few years since you left WipeDrive?
Good question. So it's a nice view to leave for about 3 years and come back and kind of take a look at everything. First off, the market has grown globally. Just the different players everywhere. The demand for phones is large and increasing. That's surprising. At WipeDrive White Canyon, we were focused mainly on computers and servers. So I was actually surprised to see how big the phone market is. And to be honest, it dwarfs the PC server market quite a bit. Also, the full circular economy has progressed and matured. Previously, it was just, hey, we want to, recycle as much as we can. We're going to shred these devices. We're going to melt them down and reuse them. Reuse the components or the bare metal products. But now it's a repair business. It's a refurbishment business. It's, hey, how can we get these phones from grade C to grade A? And then also, how can we resell an iPhone 12, an iPhone 10, an iPhone 8? Things that we weren't even thinking of before.
I think I agree with you. I mean, it's interesting the way that the sector has evolved because certainly from a UK perspective, I'll talk about my findings. It started with almost excess stock release. So let me buy your equipment and I can resell it. And then of course, data became a concern and people started adding the data aspect onto it. You then had Waste Electrical Electronic Equipment directive come in. People started looking at the recycling piece. So all of a sudden, this transaction became quite important in various different ways. Now, circularity as a buzzword has been around for a long time, but I think what we've seen perhaps in the last 5 years is that this isn't a fad. It's something which is going to be an imperative for the enterprise level customers and for all of us to embrace. And that's
Yeah, I
further
think
highlight. Sorry, Paul, go.
Yeah, I think the circular, and this is what the part of the business that I love is the circular nature of it. I think we all don't want e-waste going out there into you see the pictures of the rivers and landfills filled with e-waste and filled with this electronic debris. We understand the chemicals and the danger and the toxicity of all that. So I think underlying the circular economy is that desire to say, hey, can we have all these electronics be renewed and be reused, recycled? If so, what could we do? And I just think that's a driver underneath everything.
And do you think that the industry is evolving now to be much more, rather than just being reactive to the transaction, it's understanding the value proposition of a
Oh yeah.
professional service-led industry?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we're getting a better view of the full life cycle of a device. I think that's been a buzzword for years to say, hey, oh, we manage a full life cycle. But our life cycle was straight line, was we manufacture it, we use it, and then we shred it, right? And now
Yeah.
that's changed. It's like, hey, we manufacture it, let's reuse it as much as possible. And if so, how can we reuse it and where can we reuse it? Where is the market? Where is the resale value? Can I capture those margins over and over and over again? And then at the end of life, is there ability to recycle this or reprocess the core materials inside of this, electronic device? And right now we see it for the high-end electronic devices. The low end, like Amazon, the Echoes and the home tools, things like that, their price is so low that that's probably never going to get there for those devices. But the high end ones, the phones, for sure. There's also vacuums that are getting interest as well. Those high end electronic devices, there's a lot of players looking at saying, "Hey, we can make margins. Let's pursue this. Let's chase this down."
And that's right. And there's nothing wrong with the objective being to make more money at the end of the day. That people talk
Yeah,
about that as crude, but it's not. It's okay. That's business.
yeah,
I think personally, when we've talked before this recording, we talked about market maturity within the ITAD space. Even ITAD is perhaps the wrong word to or
yeah,
acronym to use these days.
yeah.
Um, I'm seeing a lot more of services being pulled together, whether it is secure logistics, secure data sanitization, repair, reuse,
Mhm.
refurbishment, remarketing, redeployment. All of these type of services are now being pulled together. Um, from the core business for Blackbelt, let's just go back to sanitization.
Sure.
As the market is maturing, are you seeing the attitude towards data sanitization as a required service maturing, or is it still very much begrudgingly we need to do this before we can get onto the rest of our offering?
It, yeah, it definitely used to be begrudging. Like I remember going to conventions back in 2010 and 2012, and we used to call them remarketers instead of ITADs back then. And we'd have meetings saying, "Hey, you need to erase your computers, your devices, your data-bearing storage media." And every remarketer looked around and was like, "Are you kidding me? No way. We're just going to use a free tool, or we're not going to do it at all. It doesn't matter." And it's been great to see the regulations kind of step up and say, "Hey." We have GDPR, we have California's Data Privacy Act, we have a bunch of other, HIPAA as well. But all these regulations have said, hey, data is important, and there's a teeth behind it. There's legal teeth behind it, financial concerns there, and you've seen that kind of maturity on the sanitization side, where I think now it's almost just accepted out of the box. You need to erase a device, any device that comes in, you need to process it, and part of that is erasing it or sanitizing that device. Now, what's been interesting is the testing and the diagnostic part of the business. That has continued, that has kind of exponentially grown. Before it was just kind of finding a list of all the components. Now it's how good are those components? And what we're seeing on the phone side with Black Belt 360 is how good are these phones over time? We're getting the same devices every 2 or 3 years come in. So we're actually able to test it over time and can kind of let the ITAD know, hey, we know that this component on this device, say an iPhone 12, is going to go bad around year 5. So if you want to lower RMAs, maybe you replace it at year 4, 4.5, if you receive it in that time period. That way it doesn't come back during your guarantee period or your return period. So there's just a lot of knowledge and tools being used on the diagnostic side to really get smart about what you're doing and what you're offering your customers. And that's all new. Sanitization's matured, and I think diagnostics is going to continue to mature across all the different e devices out there.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it is funny because you do see, I mean, Adisa sits on the sidelines. You don't have to do this for a living, of course, so we can sit and
Yeah,
just cheer and cheer people on.
yeah,
But I agree. I think we're seeing a lot more focus on quality as the output as opposed to just the quantity as the output. And that's when it's going back into the resale route for me is sold to a user as opposed to sold into the broker market.
yeah,
So that the quality piece is more important. As you the boomerang products, you don't like that because your margin gets eroded.
yeah.
You want to resell it and for it to stick. Let's talk about sort of on the front foot a little bit. If I'm an ITAD, what do you think are my core? But this is just drawing all your experience. What do you think are my core value proposition? Do you believe is it about dealing with data at the beginning, or is it me as a source of bona fide quality refurbished products? What do you think is the greatest driver?
There's a couple different drivers. I think the first kind of competitive advantage is the ability to capture a source of devices. I think that's the biggest issue for ITADs right now is finding a source for the devices to get inbound, right? Once they come inside to process them, and then to be seen as a trusted reseller or provider of that solution out there. And there's been a couple different bodies out there to try and do that. You have R2, of course. You have iSigma. NAID, you have eStewards. There's quite a few out there, ASCPI, that kind of focus on that certification side. But I think, what you see on the buyer side is when they buy from ITADs, they keep track of how many of those devices are good or bad. And then they
Yep.
can, then they decide later on, hey, should we go back to that ITAD or not? We got 10,000, we had a failure rate of 4%. That eroded our margins. Let's buy somewhere else. We can't really trust them. So that's where that diagnostic piece comes in. The sanitization piece is the scary part because that's where the teeth are. And if you aren't doing it correctly, that's where you can really get, everyone in that chain of custody can get bit by that financially. So big risk there as well.
Agreed, and I think our narrative, because clearly we're strong on the data sanitization piece through our certifications, and I think that what we've been talking about over the years is if we don't get the data piece right at the beginning, everything else is just best endeavor. And people say, why do organizations still shred drives, shred devices? It's all about risk. They can't manage the risk. They don't trust their
Right.
downstream,
Right.
or they're aware of some of the technical risks. And it's about overcoming those for me. I think that's one of the opportunities for ITAD is understanding what the true risks and concerns of the customers are to build that level of assurance so that we can unlock the rest of the really good stuff that we do, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and reuse, which is so important. And customers aren't always right. As much as the analogy says the customer is king, sometimes they do need to be pointed out where they're not quite correct in their understanding of how
Yeah.
some of these risks are
Yeah.
manifest in the real world. Um, just aware of time, let's talk about your new role, CEO, Black Belt
Sure.
360. What's on your to-do list for the next? Let's do it that classic, the next short, medium, and long-term vision for
Yeah.
Black Belt.
Yeah. There's a lot on our list. First off is just a change of AI to the environment and the software side. So on our developer side, bringing in AI that's air gapped, safe, and also can improve the output of our internal teams. So we're looking at that very closely. We're also looking at the analyzation of our databases. We have 8 years of, per year, 20 to 30 million diagnostics and erasures per year. What can we capture from that database? What can we harvest? What's the benefit to our clients that we can pass on? And so we're minutely looking at that, really independently looking at that, seeing what the benefit to ourselves and to our customers for that point. Going back to what you mentioned about sanitization, I think one thing we need to make a note here, and this is with all third-party tools, we're here because the OEMs refuse to help process devices after end of life or after they've been sold. And so what they're creating is this market or circular market and secondary market for us, that they actually do want us and motivated for us to shred these drives or shred these phones or shred all these devices so that they can sell their new devices to customers. And I think it's a short-sighted approach on their side. They need to understand the full life cycle of these phones and also the market that they're garnering globally by people buying an iPhone 8 out in, say a part of Africa, and then one day wanting an iPhone 15 or iPhone 20 by that time. But you're creating this whole market for future products, much like Toyota and the auto industry's already done on their side. They understand that if you haven't used Toyota when you're 16, you get your driver's license, you most likely will be a Toyota lover your whole life just because of those, fond memories early on. I think they're still slow to see that. I think they're still very focused on new manufacturing and new sales as their key driver. And I think one day that will change. In the meantime, ourselves, other third-party tools, we're here to kind of help and support the circular market do what they need to do, right? And that's having sanitized devices tested correctly and then sent to repair or sell as is, whatever needs to happen on their side. But
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a clear contradiction in many respects in the business model that's designed to manufacture new,
yeah,
to try and embrace circularity. And I know there's an awful lot of power struggles going on in some of these big vendors. And there's some really good work coming out of them as well.
yeah, sure,
But you can't, only a fool would fail to
yeah,
acknowledge that there is going to be some internal issues for them to overcome. But that's why they need a healthy refurbishment, remarketed ITAD sector to
Yeah.
actually help resolve these problems.
Yeah.
Um, Paul, I'm going to say thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated. Um, there'll be probably a narrative at the beginning and the end explaining this, but Paul and I actually met in London a few weeks ago to record this, and it was actually we were
It was
magnificent,
beautiful.
Paul. It was beautiful on the
Nice.
River
Yeah.
Thames. Unfortunately, the audio was dreadful. We couldn't clean it up enough, so this is a repeat of that conversation. So, Paul, for the second time, thank you for making time for us
Yeah.
at DSA. It is much appreciated, and I wish you the very best the rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.